Kazuya was a lonely loser who lived a boring life and couldn't score a baddie. However, when he's summoned as a hero in another world, he becomes king and starts clapping all the royal kitties. In his previous life, his grandfather's dying words were for him to start a family and protect the ones he loved. After his grandpa dies, Kazuya starts spending every day at the library until one day a magical circle mysteriously appears under him and transports him to another world. Though they give him a warm welcome, Kazuya starts cussing them out for ruining his schedule, demanding to know what's going on. King Albert explains that 10 years ago, a rift in the north unleashed monsters that seized a third of the continent, now called the Demon Lord's domain, and the nations, led by the Grand Chaos Empire, have failed to reclaim it. In the present, Kazuya is told that he wasn't summoned to fight the Demon King, but to be handed over to the Empire as financial aid. Since the Elfrieden Kingdom is broke, starving, and drowning in refugees, when the king can't give a straight answer, Kazuya worries that he might get cut up when he's handed over, so he starts thinking fast to save his skin. He convinces them that he's their most valuable asset and that if they had any brains, it'd fix their finances, adopt smarter policies, and build enough wealth to stop being pushed around. Everyone's stunned, but the dumb king asks how wealth would help, and Kazuya ignores him, promising to help change the kingdom. After 3 days of hard work, the king abdicates his throne, names Kazuya as the new king, and announces his daughter's engagement to him, leaving everyone shocked. News spreads like wildfire, and when Licia hears about it, she panics and rushes to the capital thinking her dad's in trouble, only to find him chilling with his wife, having a little too much fun. Furious, Licia yells at him for stepping down and marrying her off without so much as a heads up. But Albert humbly admits that he lacks the wits to run the kingdom and would rather stay home fully subscribed to his wife's OnlyFans account. However, Licia doesn't buy it, so she goes to check on Kazuya to see for herself how well her future husband claps behind closed doors. She walks in on Kazuya, buried in the kingdom's financial records, and the first thing he asks is if she's good with math, because together they might find the perfect angle. Licia then introduces herself, and when Kazuya realizes she's Albert's daughter, he doubts she's royalty, since she's flat on both sides. Kazuya explains that he only ended up as king because he was avoiding being handed over to the empire, but he plans to step down when the kingdom has enough money. At this point, Licia demands to know how he expects to fix the kingdom in such a short time. That's when Kazuya reveals he's already secured the aid money by selling off part of the national treasures without selling any historical pieces. Instead, he's setting them aside to earn even more as part of a museum exhibit, while he holds on to the profit until the last minute. Licia suggests putting the funds into the military, but Kazuya says he'd rather pay another country to fight while he focuses on solving the food shortage and refugee crisis so they don't risk losing the people's support. The next day, Kazuya realizes that while magic exists in this world, it's still stuck in the feudal age and way behind in tech. Before he can think too much about it, he gets called for a magic test, since summoned heroes usually come with some kind of special power. When he touches an enchanted statue, he discovers he does have magic, though he's not sure how useful it'll be. Later that morning, Licia shows up at the State Department, shocked at how fast Kazuya has gotten through the kingdom's messy finances, and even more stunned when she sees documents writing themselves. Curious, she asks about his magic. Kazuya explains he can copy his consciousness into objects to act on their own and control other things, and calls it leaving Poltergeist. Licia thinks it's weird magic, especially since it means he can fiddle 3 at once. When she asks what's going on, Kazuya explains he's digging up hidden money, hunting for suspicious spending so he can demand refunds or seize properties if they can't pay. The kingdom's broke, and they need capital to restart the economy. Licia joins in, but after an all-nighter, she and the accountants pass out. Only Kazuya is still standing. Spotting Licia asleep on the couch, Kazuya's intrusive thoughts kick in, and he almost tries to clap her. But she wakes up just in time, flustered and wondering if something flooded her gates. Kazuya plays it cool, acting like nothing happened. She worries about him not sleeping, but he assures her he'll rest when the work's done. Then he asks her to come outside, insisting there's something he wants to show her. On the way, she takes the reins, and Kazuya holds on tight, fumbling an excuse that in his world, people don't need to ride horses because of cars. Curious, Licia asks if he left any family behind in his previous world, particularly a girlfriend, and Kazuya says no. He explains that his grandfather was the last of his relatives, and he died before he was summoned to this world. Licia feels bad for him, but she tells him not to worry, and he's not too bothered that he has no one to return home to. A few minutes later, they reach the cotton fields, and Kazuya points out that these edible crops are the real reason behind the food shortage. When the demon realm attacked, cotton prices shot up, so other countries cashed in, and the kingdom followed like sheep. Farmers ditched food crops for cotton, wrecking the kingdom's food self-sufficiency. Licia thinks that's bad enough, but Kazuya says it gets worse, since normally, a country low on food can just import more, but with cotton prices crashing, the kingdom's left broke and starving. Licia feels guilty for not realizing this sooner, but Kazuya tells her to chill. He says she'll learn in time and be ready to lead once he's gone. After the fields, they grab breakfast at the regular cafeteria, where Kazuya talks about his plans: regulate commercial crops, bring back food fields, offer subsidies, sell food cheap, and cover the loss with exports, though he's still figuring out what to export instead of cotton. When Licia asks why he's eating with commoners, he says he's trying to save money. Then Captain Ludwin Arx shows up and joins them. Ludwin asks how the reforms are going, and Kazuya admits it's a pain. Besides Marx, everyone he inherited is useless, and they're part of why the kingdom's in this mess. What he really needs are smart, hardworking retainers. That afternoon, Kazuya decides to use the crystal cast to recruit talent. Licia finds it odd since it was only used for New Year's gradings, but Kazuya thinks their usual method, referrals and written exams, just hires people who look good on paper, not those with real skills. So he gives a rousing speech live, quoting a hero he respects, and his words light a fire across the kingdom. People of all walks of life start thinking about applying. Kazuya even offers a reward for rare talents and promises a certificate of peerlessness, leaving everyone fired up. At night, Licia dreams about her time with Kazuya at the cotton fields, where Kazuya told her he was showing her the kingdom's inconsistencies so she could be a better leader when he's gone. When Licia wakes up, she realizes how important Kazuya is for the kingdom's future, and after remembering that he has no one to return to in his previous world, she wonders if she can ride him well enough to make him stay. But before she can start fantasizing about getting clapped 8 inches deep, her maid Serena walks in with her clothes and reminds her that Kazuya is holding a function to honor the outstanding talents among the retainers he recruited, and she needs to attend. A few hours later, the selected retainers appear before Kazuya, and the function begins. Although it's compulsory to bow before the king, an elf named Aisha refuses, since her culture only allows her to bow to no one but her master. When Ludwin speaks against this, Kazuya says there's no need for formalities, seeing as he's the one asking for their help. Right then, Marx begins announcing the retainers and their unique talents, starting with Aisha, who's a dark elf. Using his magical abilities, Kazuya checks the history books and learns that dark elves are a minority within the Elfrieden kingdom and possess elevated combat skills. They also live in the sacred forest, rumored to be guarded by divine forces, and they're granted autonomy over the forest as its protectors. With this in mind, Kazuya plans to put Aisha's skills to use in the kingdom's defense, but before he can acknowledge her, she declines the reward money and asks for a favor instead. As Kazuya agrees, she explains that the trees in the sacred forest are thinning and their growth rate has dropped significantly. Then Kazuya asks if the trees are cut down regularly, and when Aisha says no, he explains that it's important to cut down some trees to let sunlight through, which would encourage new growth. Shocked by his knowledge, Aisha bows and pledges her allegiance to Kazuya, offering herself for him to use however he pleases. The next retainer announced is a lady named Juna, who captivates the courtroom with her massive milk jugs as she moves. Even Kazuya is impressed, but before he can entertain any thoughts of clapping her, he notices Licia's mood and snaps back to normal. According to Marx, Juna possesses unparalleled beauty, as well as a singing voice unmatched by anyone. He adds that she's a descendant of the Lorelei bloodline, which Kazuya recognizes as a race of monsters famous for using their charms to lure sailors to their doom. Intrigued, Kazuya asks her to sing a song to inspire the people, but since Juna doesn't know any, he plays her one from his previous world through his AirPods. Though she doesn't understand the language, she sings it gracefully, leaving everyone watching inspired and entertained. After her wonderful performance, everyone in the courtroom applauds Juna, while Kazuya compliments her skill. Juna is grateful for the chance to sing and even offers to learn more songs from Kazuya's previous world, to which Kazuya gladly agrees. Elsewhere, in the Principality of Amdonia, a country sharing borders with the Elfrieden kingdom, a certain female merchant hears about Kazuya's nationwide recruitment and realizes just how useless the previous retainers must have been. Back in Elfrieden, one of the retainers named Hakuya quietly sizes Kazuya up and mentally applauds how he handled Aisha's request. But deep down, he's eager to test Kazuya further and see how he'll react when the next retainer is announced. Right then, Marx announces the next retainer, who is a fatty named Poncho, and since he's nervous, he trips and falls flat before Kazuya. When he finally recovers, Marx reveals Poncho's unusual talent for eating, having bested everyone else in the kingdom who claimed the gift of gluttony. But Poncho's quest for food isn't ordinary because he has traveled far and wide, sampling the specialties and delicacies of every region, and claims to have eaten just about everything there is to eat, Immediately after hearing this, Kazuya is moved to personally compliment Poncho, believing that his skill is an important asset to the kingdom's crisis. Shocked, Poncho sheds, lamenting that people called him a fool for eating so much. But Kazuya encourages him and says his talents will be the very thing that will help solve the food crisis. Hakuya is impressed by Kazuya's reactions to Poncho's gifts, and he looks forward to facing him himself. Meanwhile, others in the kingdom begin to consider Kazuya's offer since they never expected someone with talents like Poncho's to be recognized so well. Back in the courtroom, the next retainer announced is Hakuya, who, according to Marx, is a referral and has exhibited a talent for intellect. It's believed that his knowledge and memory are unrivaled throughout the kingdom, and Kazuya is intrigued by this. When asked who recommended him, Hakuya says it was his uncle, who he claims pressured him to go out and be productive rather than spend the rest of his plutless life watching videos with one hand. Kazuya smiles after hearing this since he used to get the same type of treatment in his previous world, except for the one-handed thingy. When Hakuya reveals that he reads all types of books, Kazuya offers him a position as a librarian in the castle so he can have access to even more. But Hakuya politely refuses, asking instead to put his knowledge to work supporting Kazuya directly. Then Kazuya asks why he turned down the librarian role, and Hakuya admits that he's been observing Kazuya since the start of the function, trying to judge if he's a king worth serving, and now he's made up his mind, especially because of how he handled Poncho's talent reveal. Kazuya takes a liking to Hakuya immediately, and arranges for a private meeting so he can see for himself just how gifted Hakuya is. After that, Marx announces the last retainer, and it's a girl named Tommoay of the Mystic Wolves, who has an unusual talent of being able to converse with birds and beasts. On second thought, Kazuya realizes that she's a refugee. Seeing that no other mystic wolves are living in the kingdom, he aims to utilize her skills regardless, but he's left completely shocked when she whispers to him about a dark side to her talents. Kazuya struggles to keep a straight face after hearing Tommoay's secret, and when she confirms that only her mother knows about it, he plays it cool, acting like she made a normal request so the nobles don't suspect anything unusual. He then tells Marx that he's interested in Tommoay's talent but will need some time to figure out the best way to use it, and asks for a private discussion later. After the function ends, Kazuya hosts a closed-door meeting with Licia, Marx, and Ludwig to discuss Tommoay's rare talents. Here, Kazuya mentions that though Tommoay can converse with animals, she can understand and converse with demons as well. Everyone is left shocked after hearing this, because in this world, demons are the only set of monsters with intellect, and they speak a language no one else can understand. Licia struggles to believe it, but Tommoay tells her that she had an encounter with a demon who looked like a dog recently. She recalls how, while picking wild vegetables in the mountains, she ran into a demon that looked like a dog. Right then, she screamed for help. But before she knew it, the demon spoke, just as shocked that she could understand him. When he confirmed she could, he told her he couldn't bear to see someone with the same scent as him get killed, and then left after telling her to run away. As Ludwig struggles to believe this, Kazuya points out that there's only a handful of demons who will let a mystic wolf escape from them. He believes that being able to communicate with demons has the potential to change their situation dramatically, but not necessarily for the better. Because if news of Tommoay's rare ability were to spread beyond their borders, it's likely that other countries, rather than seeing it as an opportunity for peace, would view it as a dangerous threat and might decide to turn against them to eliminate what they see as a risk. His suspicions are proven right when Ludwig reveals that the kingdom is at odds with other countries it shares a border with. Despite this, Kazuya rules out the possibility of a conflict since it's only a probable outcome, while Marx suggests that they keep Tommoay's abilities hidden from the public for her safety. Kazuya agrees, turning to Tommoay as he assures her that she'll be protected by the kingdom as its most valuable asset. However, Marx believes she'll draw more attention if that happens, and because he likes his ladies like numbers on the clock, never past 12. He suggests that Kazuya take her as a concubine to keep her close, but that gets ruled out. Instead, Kazuya asks if the royal couple can adopt her, and although Licia likes the idea of having a little sister, it doesn't sit right with Tommoay, since she has a mother and a brother waiting for her at the refugee camp. However, she decides otherwise after Kazuya gently assures her that adopting her would mean her family would also be under the kingdom's protection. With that settled, Marx suggests assigning Tommoay to a position that requires her to stay within the castle, which would keep her protected pending the time her adoption is announced, so she ends up being put in charge of the royal carriage, and Kazuya agrees with this. After the meeting, rather than staying in his office, Kazuya chills in Licia's bedroom to craft a doll. When asked why he is doing it there, he tells her that everyone in the State Affairs office is working hard, and he won't feel comfortable sewing there, As a result, Licia suggests that he request her father to give up the royal bedroom, but Kazuya declines since he's not ready to have kids or change diapers yet. Then he asks about Tommoay, and Licia tells him that her mother has taken a liking to her and hasn't left her since. While she adds that Tommoay is comfortable with the change, Serena enters the room, and on seeing them together, she backs away, thinking they develop plots soon. A few plotless hours later, Serena heads back and informs Kazuya that Pancho is back from his assignment. Pancho meets Kazuya in the reception room and is grateful for being allowed to use the royal wyvern since it allowed him to complete his trip faster. Apparently, he was sent to gather a unique set of food with a national class sack, which will prevent what's in it from spoiling. Curious, Licia wonders why Kazuya would go to such lengths to get food, and when asked, Kazuya only tells her he's hoping to do the kingdom a little good. A few hours later, Juna and Pancho use the crystal cast to broadcast what's basically a medieval Food Network show, aiming to teach the public about other kinds of food they can cook and eat while the food crisis gets sorted out. Kazuya appears on the show as the featured cook, and for his first dish, he surprises everyone by starting with a live octopus. The moment it's revealed, Licia, Aisha, and the other tasters are stunned, except for Juna, who's already used to handling slippery tops like that. Meanwhile, Kazuya skillfully dresses the octopus and transforms it into a crispy fried meat kebab that has Aisha practically drooling. When he's done, Tommoay and the rest are shocked at how mouth-watering it looks, and even more shocked once they take a bite and realize just how delicious it is. As a result, people watching the show from their homes start considering adding octo kebabs to their own menus. Back on the show, Pancho reveals tree roots as the base ingredient for the next dish, and although Tommoay doesn't think they look the least bit appetizing, Aisha says otherwise since she's used to sampling long and hard things for survival. When Kazuya finishes cooking the roots, the girls are amazed at how sweet they taste, but Aisha takes the tasting a bit too far, to the point where even her family starts wondering if she's planning to eat the whole kingdom. Up next, Pancho brings out a pre-cooked locust meal, and Aisha, who previously claimed she could eat anything, suddenly finds herself stuck wondering where to even begin. But when Tommoay tries it and says it tastes good, Aisha rushes over to taste it. The moment Kazuya tastes it, tears well up in his eyes as the sweet flavor reminds him of his homeland. But whatever relief that brought quickly fades when the starting ingredient for the next dish is revealed, wiping the smile off everyone's faces. Apparently, it's a gelin, a slimy creature that Pancho unsurprisingly knows exactly how to cook. Aisha wonders how he even managed to get a slaughtered gelin, and Licia shares the same thought, prompting Kazuya to ask about the nature of these creatures. Licia explains that gelins are so fragile that even a small cut to their surface membrane is enough to unalive them and send all their bodily fluids spilling out. Curious, Kazuya asks to know how Pancho managed to prepare one without losing all the fluids. Pancho, drawing on something he picked up during his travels, explains that if one strikes a gelin hard enough to destroy the nucleus without breaking the membrane, the internal fluids will gradually solidify. As he talks, Pancho flattens the gelin and slices it into fine strips that look just like pasta. He cooks it up, and when it's served, Kazuya can't help but notice it resembles a certain type of noodle from his previous world. As a result, Licia insists Kazuya taste it first, since he's the one with experience eating something similar. And although skeptical, Kazuya takes a bite. He surprises everyone by saying it's sweet, and Aisha rushes to try it and agrees, which encourages the others to dig in. Soon, they're all nodding in approval, while those watching from outside are left stunned. With that final dish wrapped up, Juna and Pancho bring the cooking show to a close, promising to return with another edition in the future. However, merely a week later, demand for those unique ingredients skyrockets, and Kazuya is shocked to see that the people are already eager for the next episode of the show. But before he can even think about scheduling the follow-up, Serena walks into his office and informs him that Marx has something important to discuss. Marx shows up with Hakuya and officially tenders his resignation as Prime Minister, following in the footsteps of the previous king. He recommends Hakuya as his replacement, saying he's the only one with the talent to take on the role, and Kazuya approves, though he decides to schedule the formal appointment for another day. Marx is pleased with Kazuya's decision, mostly because he's looking forward to enjoying his hefty retirement benefits and ticking off some of the weirdest fantasies on his bucket list. But when Kazuya gives him the look, Marx remembers the kingdom's financial crisis and quickly makes it clear he's open to accepting whatever reward Kazuya has in mind. Kazuya just smiles and gives him an ironic compliment about being wise and knowing how much experience Marx has in handling the kingdom's affairs. Kazuya asks him to stick around for a while longer, and Marx agrees. Before the meeting wraps up, Hakuya makes a surprising request, telling Kazuya to take some time off, leaving him genuinely shocked. and before Kazuya can argue that he doesn't have time for that, Hakuya informs him that he's already cleared his schedule for the day, so he's free whether he likes it or not. Kazuya jokes that maybe he'll just spend the time reading Gifted Heads with hand lotion, but Hakuya shuts that down, reminding him that the whole point is for his underlings to see that even their workaholic king can take a break. Kazuya entertains the idea, but is floored when Hakuya goes a step further and suggests he take Lisha out on a date, and Mark seconds the motion. To make things worse, Kazuya needs to take Aisha along so she'll act as their guard in case anything comes up. After the meeting, Kazuya walks to the training arena to call Lisha, only to find her in an intensive training session with Aisha. Seeing that the castle will be destroyed if they keep training, Kazuya yells at them to stop, and they're shocked that he was there the entire time. Kazuya tells them about the date, and Aisha immediately tells him to pay a visit to the sacred forest, but he turns that down since the place is far away. He then asks about the situation back home, and Aisha tells him that some of her people are resistant to the tree-felling methods. She begs him to come and talk some sense into her people, and Kazuya agrees to show up only when time allows it. Pleased, Aisha dedicates her life once again to his service, and when he asks her to join him on the date, she agrees instantly, leaving Lisha in a visibly jealous state. Right then, they all change into the military academy's uniform to disguise their identities while they're out in the royal capital. Kazuya thinks Lisha looks cute, but when Aisha steps up seeking validation, all she gets is a long pause from Kazuya. This makes Aisha regret not wearing her bodysuit instead, but Kazuya shuts that idea down, saying she's already too giggly for her own good. On the way to town, Kazuya reminds them they're undercover, so he tells them to call him by his first name to sound casual. That's when he realizes the naming system in this world is flipped, and they've mistaken his first name for his last. Aisha shrugs it off as no big deal and agrees to call him by his first name, but when she asks him to rate her looks again, he smirks and says she's a solid 10, but only thanks to those S-rank jugs. As time goes on, they explore the town and visit plenty of places, but when they stop to rest, Aisha says she's hungry, so they head to Juna's restaurant. The moment Juna sees Kazuya and the girls, she nearly blurts out that he's the king, but a simple gesture from him reminds her he's undercover, so she welcomes him like any normal customer. Juna serves them the Gillen pasta poncho invented, and she explains that it's because the demand has skyrocketed ever since the food show. She compliments Kazuya for being so smart about handling the food crisis, and Kazuya flashes her a smile that makes Lisha jealous, immediately questioning why he treats Juna differently. In his head, Kazuya admits it's because of her S-rank jugs, but not wanting to hurt Lisha's feelings, he just says that cute baddies make him nervous, and when he sees one, all the blood rushes out of his brain to somewhere else. While Lisha wonders where that place might be, Aisha nearly inhales everything on her plate, and when someone compares her eating style to Poncho's, she freezes, realizing maybe that's why Kazuya still hasn't invited her over to develop plot. Kazuya quickly shuts that down, reminding her that he's already engaged, but this shocks the ladies since Kazuya hasn't figured out that he could have a harem if he wanted. Lisha explains that polygamy is recognized in the kingdom, and even women can have multiple husbands. She goes on to reveal that it was actually her mother who held the royal power, and her father simply married into the royal family and became king by title. This makes Kazuya wonder if Albert really made the right call by handing him the crown, but Lisha assures him that her mother backed the decision as well. She casually mentions that he could take as many as 8 wives if he wished. And for a second, Kazuya imagines living the dream of having one wife every day of the week. But he snaps back to reality when he overhears a suspicious conversation across the room. Thinking back, Kazuya reflects on the strength of the kingdom's military, most of which is under the control of the 3 dukes, and it hits him that this setup could be a major disadvantage. After all, when he reached out to them about his reforms, the dukes did nothing but hit him with the silent treatment up until now. At present, the conversation across the room is between a certain Cade, who is a mystic fox, and Halbert Magna from the army. Lisha reveals that Halbert is the oldest heir to the Magna family, and he's an outstanding officer in the military, while June reveals that Cade is a mage with the Forbidden Army, a unit that reports directly to the king. Their attention shifts to Cade and Halbert when Cade tries to talk Halbert out of heading to the Carmen Duchy. Cade believes Duke Carmen is beefing with Kazuya, and she fears it could spark a civil war. But despite her concerns, Halbert takes it as all the more reason to go, since he's itching for a chance to show off his skills. When Cade says his father is worried sick about him, Halbert snaps, mocking his old man for serving under Duke Carmen for years only to chicken out and hide in the capital when it's time to face the new king. Cade counters, saying she doesn't trust Duke Carmen at all, since any war would only benefit Amdonia, who's itching to reclaim the lands they lost. Not to mention Turgis, who is waiting for winter so they can swoop in and snatch the kingdom's fertile lands. As she speaks, Kazuya listens carefully, recalling a conversation he had with Hakuya on the same issue. Back then, he learned that the kingdom was on bad terms with all its neighbors, and at least one of them was openly hostile. Hakuya pointed out that since Kazuya terminated the mercenary contract with the kingdom of Zem, it's highly unlikely that Zem would make a move, and they'd have no problem sending mercenaries to support Amdonia if war broke out. Kazuya saw it as payback for ending the contract since he never trusted soldiers who fought for money. But their true angle became clear when Hakuya revealed that Amdonia sent a letter offering to help him overthrow the three dukes, causing him trouble. Apparently, Amdonia sent the exact same offer to the dukes, promising help to overthrow the new king. Hakuya saw it for what it was, which was a ploy to stir up chaos, slip troops into the kingdom, and snatch up cities while everyone's too busy fighting to stop them. In the present, Halbert chooses to side with Duke Carmen, even though he's unsure of the Duke's true motives, mostly because so many noblemen have already taken his side. Kate counters, pointing out that those nobles are only angry because the king exposed their corruption. Even as she begs him to reconsider, Halbert brushes it off, saying that a fresh king like Kazuya is no match for a seasoned commander like Duke Carmen. When Cade insists that Kazuya is a formidable king, Kazuya himself cuts in, asking why she thinks so, and that's when Cade suddenly realizes she's talking to the king. In another room, Cade panics, begging Kazuya to forgive Halbert for the nasty things he said, but Halbert, still thinking Kazuya is just some random guy snooping on their business, tells him to stay out of it and even yells at Cade to shut up. He only calms down after Aisha pins him to the floor when he tries to lay hands on Kazuya. Turns out Juina was ready to teach him a lesson if he hadn't backed off. When Halbert recovers from the pain, he takes a good look at Kazuya, realizes who he is, and reverts to factor settings, begging for forgiveness. Right then, Kazuya tries to reason with him, warning that siding with Duke Carmen means he'll have to face Cade on the battlefield since she serves in the Forbidden Army that reports directly to him. The idea of putting Cade in harm's way, even if he wouldn't want to fight her, makes Halbert reconsider his decision, and in the end, he chooses to stand with her. Outside, Licia sits beside Kazuya enjoying the view, while Aisha dozes off under a nearby tree. Licia praises how well Kazuya handled the situation, but he claims he just showed them the reality of what would happen if they ended up on opposite sides. Thrilled, Licia offers her lap for him to rest on, and although Kazuya hesitates at first, he gives in anyway. As he lies there, Licia quietly wishes he'd take their engagement seriously, and when Kazuya asks if she's really okay with marrying him, she boldly says yes. But after seeing his reaction, she quickly claims it's just because he's the only one fit to be king, and marrying him is her duty. However, Kazuya tells her he can only marry for love, leaving Licia wondering if he'll ever fall for her. Before the awkward silence drags on, Aisha calls them out, tired of pretending she's asleep, leaving the couple flustered. The following day, Kazuya notices that his leaving Poltergeist skill has improved, and he can now control the doll he made. But before he can finish checking out his new abilities, Serena arrives and informs him that Glaive Magna, his son Halbert, and Cade are requesting to see him. The moment Kazuya shows up, he casually teases Halbert for looking more manly, complimenting the fresh scars earned from his father's discipline for being so rude before. Glaive begs for forgiveness on Halbert's behalf, and even promises to further straighten out his worthless, disgusting son for siding with Duke Carmen. But Kazuya waves it off, joking that there's no need, since Cade might lose interest if Halbert's face gets too beat up. Right then, he recognizes Cade's talents as a mage and appoints her to serve under Ludwin in the Royal Guard as a staff officer, leaving Cade completely stunned. As for Halbert, Kazuya transfers him from the regular army to the Forbidden Army as Cade's adjutant, so he can stay close and support her properly. Halbert is grateful for the transfer, but just as Kazuya is about to wrap things up, Glaive asks to speak with him in private. What Glaive reveals leaves Kazuya in utter shock, and he's left wondering what to do with the controversial information he just heard. The following day, Kazuya's doll joins an adventuring party on a mission to explore the pathways beneath the royal capital. For simplicity, let's stick with Dylan as the doll's name. The adventurers assume he's just some guy in a mascot costume, partly because of the rumors they've heard, and also because the guy can hold his own. As they press on, the party gets ambushed by all sorts of monsters, from giant serpents to swarms of bats, but each time, Dylan steps up and wipes them out single-handedly, leaving his teammates impressed. However, that small sense of victory goes straight down the drain when a giant salamander shows up. At first, one of the adventurers gets ready to charge, but the moment it's revealed that the salamander can spit out corrosive acid, he shouts for everyone to run for their lives. During the scramble, Dylan slips and falls, and terrified that he's about to get crushed, uses her magic to distract the beast just long enough for him to recover. But before he can fully regain his footing, the salamander sprays out more acid shots, and Dylan shields Yuna with his body, taking the hit to protect her. Right after that, he picks her up and bolts for the exit, carrying her in his arms until they finally make it out of the tunnel. Outside, the party is grateful they get to keep their heads for another day, while Yuna tends to Dylan's scar. She scolds him for slipping but then thanks him for saving her the way he did earlier. Although Dylan can't speak, Yuno is the only one who understands his gestures, and her mate thinks it's because they're in love. That evening, Kazuya cleans Dylan up and is grateful he added an acid resistance material when he made him. Then Leisha shows up, wondering what's up with Dylan since he looks bigger than she remembers. Kazuya tells her he hired a craftsman to make Dylan, and that he moves around utilizing his living poltergeist skill. On hearing this, Leisha pieces things together and realizes that Dylan is the mascot adventurer she's been hearing about recently. Curious, she asks why Kazuya made Dylan join the adventurer party to explore the underground pathways, and Kazuya claims he just wanted to see what the place looks like. Leisha knows he's hiding something, and even when she asks if he noticed anything unusual about the tunnels, he gives her the silent treatment. A few days later, Kazuya assembles all the state officers in his courtroom and compliments them for their hard work, because now the kingdom finally has the capital it needs to set itself up economically. He goes on to mention that he intends to proceed with Project Venet Nova, and the moment he says it, Leisha recalls a conversation she once had with him about that very project. Back then, Kazuya told her that Venet Nova was the name of a city he planned to build along the kingdom's coast, where he'd establish a port. At first, Leisha pointed out that they already had a port at Lagoon City under the Walter Duchy's control, and she even thought Kazuya might be trying to stir up some beef with her family. But Kazuya said otherwise. He explained that his goal wasn't to provoke anyone but to build a new coastal city and start constructing roads that would connect the port to other cities, making it easier to distribute goods and ultimately lowering food costs across the kingdom. At present, Kazuya thanks the officials for cutting out wasteful spending, which helped to raise the funds required for the Venet Nova project. He rewards them with a compulsory 5-day vacation starting tomorrow and allows them to take wine from the royal collection, so they can sell it for cash and clap those expensive royal baddies. After the meeting, Leisha catches up with Kazuya, worried that he's been overworking himself and barely getting any sleep. She urges him to rely more on his living poltergeist skill to help ease the load on his shoulders, but Kazuya explains that he already has, and it's just that raising funds for the kingdom took so much out of him that he's still exhausted. Leisha gently tells him not to push himself so hard, but when he half jokes that they could always summon a new hero to take his place, she leans in and softly whispers into his sleepy ear that she'd rather have him. The following day, Kazuya arrives at the Venet Nova construction site to inspect the area, but he can't help wondering why such a well-suited spot has been left unused for so long. When Ludwin reports to him, he explains that a certain group of people is opposing the project because they believe the land belongs to the Kaijin, a rumored sea god, and that any buildings erected there would be destroyed. Curious, Kazuya asks if there are any actual records of this sea god, but both Aisha and Leisha say no, which makes Ludwin dismiss the whole thing as superstition. Right then, Kazuya asks to meet the leader of the opposition, an old man named Yurup. At first, Yurup is rude to Ludwin, annoyed they are still on about this Kaijin business, but the moment Kazuya introduces himself as the king, Yurup's attitude softens. He advises Kazuya to reconsider building on the site because of the Kaijin, but Kazuya is more interested in learning just how far the so-called sacred lands stretch. Armed with this information, Kazuya returns to the capital and discusses it with Hakuya, who immediately questions whether Kazuya believes in sea gods. Apparently, Kazuya doesn't buy the rumor, but as he breaks it down, he realizes there is a deeper message. The locals don't want anyone building houses in that particular area because it's where a tsunami hits, and with that in mind, Kazuya decides to shift the planned location of Venet Nova by a few clicks to keep it out of harm's way. Although Ludwin points out that adjusting the plan will delay the project, Kazuya insists. He says the Forbidden Army and Earth Magic Mages will make it a priority. While Kazuya speaks, Aisha gets a little wet, deeply moved by how much he cares for the kingdom, and when Leisha asks if she likes him, she screams yes so loudly that for the first time, Leisha isn't jealous. The following day, Halbert finds himself stuck alongside other soldiers from the Forbidden Army, helping to build roads, and he's pissed that they're being used as cheap labor. Before he can keep running his big mouth, Cade shows up and tells him to suck it up. Curious, he asks why the Forbidden Army is being dragged into road construction, and Cade explains that the original workers are short-handed and that the project is meant to build a network of roads stretching throughout the kingdom, starting with the newly built port city. Even with that, Halbert grumbles that it feels unethical to have the Forbidden Army doing this kind of work, since in his mind, their only job should be protecting the kingdom. During lunch, Halbert joins Cade to have a typical hamburger, which was invented by Kazuya in this world. Halbert enjoys the meal and compliments Hakuya's cooking skills, while Cade starts talking about Kazuya's foresight in creating the roads. She explains the impact the new roads will have on the food distribution network, pointing out that food prices will drop soon. Halbert is amazed by this and can't help but be impressed by how far ahead Kazuya thinks when he's trying to solve problems. Speaking of the devil, Kazuya shows up with Lisha, and Halbert is shocked to his bones. He greets him the military way, but Kazuya brushes it off, telling him to drop the formalities and just talk to him like a normal person. And when Halbert insists otherwise, Kazuya orders him to drop it, saying that he's happy to find a guy he can chat casually with. Outside, Lisha watches as the soldiers build the roads and is impressed at how a mushy mix of volcanic ash and lime can turn so tough when left over time. As for the trees planted on both sides of the road, Kazuya calls them warding trees, and Aisha explains that they constantly give off a frequency that monsters and wild animals can't stand, and that her village uses the same method to keep monsters away. Lisha finds this pretty handy, but Kazuya tells her the trees shouldn't be planted too close together, so they don't stop animals from migrating to their preferred hunting grounds when the seasons change. He figures that if wild beasts aren't allowed to migrate, they'd probably end up attacking farm animals or even people once their food supply runs out. As Kazuya explains all this, Cade can't help but admire his foresight and calls him a genius. But the happy mood ends when Aisha receives a message from a bird, telling her that her village has been struck by a large-scale landslide, resulting in many casualties. Everyone is shocked after hearing this, but Kazuya stays calm and instantly starts thinking of a way to handle the situation. He asks about the number of soldiers on site, and when Cade tells him, he decides to mobilize them to the sacred forest for a rescue mission since they're much closer. Then he tells Lisha to head back to the royal capital, mobilize a proper rescue party, and send relief supplies to the sacred forest. However, one problem still lingers because Aisha says it would take about 2 days to reach her village if they travel with the soldiers. Worried that more people will die before help arrives, Kazuya decides to use earth-based beasts for travel and reaches the village within hours. Aisha's father, Woden Ugard, who is also the leader of the Dark Elves, welcomes him and reports on the situation. He explains that the landslide occurred on a slope east of the village. Over 100 people are dead, and there are still more than 40 missing. After hearing this, Kazuya asks for a list of the missing and tells Woden to make sure people stand guard and watch the mountain, so that in case it shifts again, they can report it immediately. Aisha volunteers for this, insisting that she knows the mountains well, and Woden agrees, telling her to take a few others who know the area. Outside, Kazuya addresses his men, telling them to focus on rescuing the missing and to run for their lives if another landslide strikes. With that, the soldiers start the rescue mission, digging through the site and listening to the cries of the injured trapped under the rocks. Kazuya joins them on the mission and uses his living poltergeist skill to make finding potential survivors easier, but throws up when his rat doll comes across the squashed corpses of some unlucky elves. Within 24 hours of dedicated searching, every missing person is accounted for, though Woden reports that some didn't make it due to their injuries. He thanks Kazuya for all his help, acknowledging that if he hadn't shown up, the casualties would have been much worse. However, the moment Aisha arrives and tells them that Lisha has made it from the capital with a relief unit, they're all relieved to hear it, except for Rob Thor, Woden's brother, who bitterly says it's already too late. When Kazuya tries to speak with him, Rob Thor snaps, saying that nothing Kazuya does will bring the dead back, but Woden quickly cuts in and rebukes him. He apologizes to Kazuya on his brother's behalf and explains that Rob Thor lost his wife to the landslide, and on top of that, his daughter is still fighting for her life. Kazuya, understanding the man's pain, tries to offer some comfort, but Rob Thor flares up again, this time demanding to know why the sacred forest he's spent his life protecting would take his wife from him. Seeing his pain, Woden calms him down, reminds him not to point fingers yet, and to pray that his daughter makes it out alive. As Kazuya watches it all unfold, deep down, it eats at him that he can't do more than what he's already done, so he goes outside to get some air. Here, Aisha joins him and reveals that it was actually Rob Thor who opposed the practice of thinning the forest regularly. She wonders if his family might have been spared if he hadn't resisted the thinning, but Kazuya explains that even if he had agreed to it, thinning would have only reduced the risk of a landslide, not prevented it entirely. He adds that Rob Thor's idea of protecting the forest is flawed because nature isn't weak and doesn't need people to protect it, since the only thing humans do is try to keep it in a state that suits them. After the conversation, Kazuya leaves the village with Lisha, feeling disappointed in himself because he believes he could have done more. Licia argues that he did his best, but Kazuya tells her that his job is to make preparations ahead of time and to manage emergencies before they even happen, and he hates that he failed to do that. He sheds tears, angry at himself for being so focused on the kingdom's financial crisis and food shortage that he overlooked other important things, and Licia can only watch silently. That evening, Juana finds Kazuya at the State Affairs office, still going through paperwork despite it being so late. She's worried about him since Licia told her he's not been sleeping well, so she takes it upon herself to make sure he falls asleep using any means necessary. The moment she sits beside Kazuya and notices something growing, she gives him a gentle massage, but before she can add a sloppy toppy, he falls into a deep sleep. The following day, the three dukes host a meeting to discuss whether they will stand with Kazuya or not. Duke Castor Vargas makes it clear he plans to rebel, and when he senses Duchess Excel's dismissal, he wonders why she's backing Kazuya's side all of a sudden, since she disliked him from the start and refused his request for assistance. That's when Excel tells him that she cares more about the peace and safety of Lagoon City, pointing out that if they keep quarreling amongst themselves, it would only favor the neighboring countries who are planning to strike the kingdom. Castor, fully aware of this, admits he received an offer from Amdonia, who promised to send reinforcement to help dethrone the king if he's in on it, but Excel suspects the same offer was sent to Kazuya as well. When she turns to Duke Carmen for his thoughts, noting that Kazuya's leadership has been solid so far, the general coldly says he can't allow Kazuya to rule. In his eyes, Kazuya isn't fit to be king because he doesn't hesitate to cut off anything that doesn't serve the kingdom's interest, whether it's history, tradition, loyal soldiers, or ministers who dedicated their lives to the crown. His words make Excel wonder if he plans to seize the throne himself, but Carmen makes it clear that once Kazuya is dealt with, he'll see to it that Albert is put back on the throne. Fearing the bloodshed ahead, Excel urges Castor to break ties with his family so they won't get dragged into his feud with Kazuya. But before Castor can even process that, his daughter Carla, Excel's granddaughter, storms in, demanding to join the fight against Kazuya. Despite Excel's dismissal, she insists because she believes Kazuya disposed of the previous king and attempted to violate her friend Licia. Meanwhile, King Gaius of Amdonia receives a letter from Carmen, accepting his offer to get mercenaries to stand against Kazuya. He smiles at the letter, mocking Carmen for growing so foolish as to accept his offer, and then tells his son Julius that they'll send mercenaries to both Kazuya and the three dukes to ignite a civil war. Meanwhile, his daughter Aroa is against this and wonders why her father and brother would be stupid enough to attack Elfrieden. In the meantime, Hakuya presents a report to Kazuya concerning the imminent civil war, and deep down, Kazuya hates that he'll have to use cruel methods to face those opposing him. Although he gets second thoughts, he recalls that his late grandfather advised him to start a family and keep him safe, so he decides to do anything it takes to protect the kingdom and those he cares about. Meanwhile, in Amdonia, King Gaius orders his troops to assemble so they can invade Elfrieden, but before things go any further, Finance Minister Colbert rushes in and begs him to reconsider, warning that people will starve if he pushes forward with the plan. Pissed and feeling insulted, Gaius beats him to a pulp, seething because ever since Kazuya took the throne, Elfrieden has been making a strong national comeback. When Colbert reminds him that attacking would bring sanctions from other nations, Gaius is even more enraged, since Amdonia is a signatory to the Grand Chaos Empire's Declaration of Mankind's Common Front, an agreement that prevents countries from fighting one another while they're still dealing with the Demon Lord's forces. As Gaius remembers this, his frustration boils over and he nearly takes Colbert's head off. But Julius steps in at the last minute and points out that since Elfrieden never signed the treaty, they're fair game. However, Colbert keeps trying to argue, and since Gaius has had enough, he strips Colbert of his position as finance minister and casts him out. There, Colbert runs into Roroa, who urges him to run away with her so they can stay hidden if things go south. In the meantime, Licia meets with Kazuya and learns he's about to have a word with the three dukes, but before he leaves, he asks her for a big favor. When the virtual conference kicks off, Kazuya uses enchanted mirrors to connect with them, and he issues an ultimatum that if they keep disobeying his orders, he'll have no choice but to declare them traitors. The first thing Excel asks is what Kazuya plans to do with the three duchies if they choose to follow him, and Kazuya explains that he'll merge their forces with his forbidden army into a single entity called the United Force, which will operate under his direct command. Castor immediately dismisses the idea, arguing that it's improper for a human to hold authority over all the races of the kingdom, but Kazuya shuts that down, pointing out that their old three-party system might have worked in peacetime, but these are times of war and things need to change. Excel's next question is about Lagoon City's future. Once the Venet Nova project is complete, and Kazuya reassures her, explaining that the new city will serve as a trade port and tourist hub, while Lagoon City will remain the kingdom's naval stronghold. Relieved, Excel kneels before the other dukes and pledges her allegiance to Kazuya, promising to place the navy under his command. But Castor, on the other hand, refuses to side with him, bitter that the previous king handed over the throne without so much as confiding in the dukes. Even so, he says only 100 members of his air force will actively oppose Kazuya, while the rest will stay neutral. As for General Carmen, Kazuya doesn't even bother asking where he stands, since he already knows the big cat would love nothing more than to rip his head off and toss it to the dogs. But when he does ask why Carmen insists on opposing him, the general says his pride as a warrior won't allow him to stand behind someone like Kazuya. Kazuya calls him a fool for clinging to such beliefs and promises that when this is over, he'll step over Carmine's face on his way to victory. Towards the end of the conference, Kazuya proposes a condition that whichever side loses must surrender its forces to the victor to prevent unnecessary bloodshed, and both dukes agree to the terms. Right then, Leisha calls Carmine's attention and cuts off a part of her hair, signaling that she's joining the fight against him. Carmen, though shocked, acknowledges her resolve and looks forward to seeing her in battle. As Carmen and Castor leave the meeting, Excel lingers a little longer, and it turns out that it was thanks to Juna that Kazuya was able to win Excel over to his side, even though Juna had originally been sent to keep an eye on him. The following day, Kazuya is informed that King Gaius is leading his forces to reclaim Altamira City. When Gaius reaches the city, he halts just outside the gates, eager to invade it, knowing that gaining control of the place would give him access to whole grains that could help rescue his struggling economy. A diplomat named Weist comes out from the city and offers a full surrender, pleading with Gaius to delay his advancement because a riot has broken out between factions supporting and opposing the surrender. Though Gaius reminds him that he could take the city by force at any moment, Weist continues to beg, for the sake of the innocent lives inside. He promises that if Gaius guarantees his safety, he'll ensure a smooth and bloodless handover of the city. Eventually, Gaius agrees to wait, but the moment Weist leaves, he mutters to himself that he'll make an example out of him. Elsewhere, the mercenaries assigned to Carmen launch an attack on a city within the kingdom, and Halbert Cade and others from the Forbidden Army fight to protect it. At one point, Halbert channels fire magic into his spear and hurls it at the enemy, wiping out a wave of mercenaries in a single strike. But before he can even take pride in his feat, Cade urgently warns him that the mercenaries are bringing in cannons. One shot nearly blasts the city walls apart, but before things can get worse, an elf appears and intercepts a cannonball aimed at the wall. Stunned and curious, Halbert asks who he is, and the elf introduces himself as Sir from the Sacred Forest. As he blocks another cannon shot, he explains that he came to help, since Halbert saved his daughter after the landslide, and now the girl dreams of joining the Forbidden Army when she grows up. While Sir intercepts every cannon shot fired at the wall, Ludwig leads a charge of soldiers out of the city, ordering his men to ignore the mercenaries and focus solely on taking out the cannons. Thanks to their precision, the cannons are destroyed, and the mercenaries are left with no other option than to retreat to Carmen's domain. When Carmen gets word that the mercenaries have been repelled, he's visibly pissed, but what really strikes a nerve is when the corrupt politicians who funded the mercenaries start calling him incompetent. He reminds them that he commands 40,000 men, while Kazuya only has 10,000, so defeating Kazuya's forces should be a walk in the park. One of the politicians suggests launching an all-out attack and sending every soldier they have to storm the city, but Carmen quickly shuts that down. He suspects Kazuya might not even be in the city at all, since the Forbidden Army only fought defensively, and believes that if Kazuya were really there, he'd be making a move against him by now. With this in mind, Carmen plans to lure Kazuya out, and he's confident he'll end the war in a day or two. Around sunset, when Gaius finally loses his patience and orders his men to invade the Altamira, he's caught off guard by an aggressive roar coming from within the city and gets pissed. Coincidentally, Weist appears and apologizes for the delay in opening the gates, explaining that the sounds Gaius heard are from the faction inside the city that's opposing the surrender. As a way to calm things down, he empties his pockets full of gold coins and offers them to Gaius, asking him to give him till noon the following day to handle things in the city. On seeing this, Julius tells Gaius to consider the offer, and the old man agrees. Meanwhile at night, Weist meets with Duchess Excel, who's skeptical about giving up that much gold, but she reassures him, saying she's simply buying time and that anyone who doesn't understand the value of trading gold for time is a fool. Weist can't help but be impressed as he wonders how Kazuya managed to convince Excel to come all the way to Altamira, especially when Carmen and Castor had no idea she was attending the conference from here. However, when he reminds Excel they only have until noon tomorrow, and asks what will happen if Kazuya doesn't make his move by then, Excel shrugs and jokes that they'll all die like heroes, The following day, Halbert and Cade spot the enemy's formation and realize that they have the upper hand, but before Halbert can rejoice, he notices Duke Castor's air force flying in for an attack. Last night, Castor had completely evacuated the civilians from his duchy, leaving behind only a solid force from his air force. Surprisingly, he admitted that Kazuya was a good king, and when Tommen asked if he planned to switch sides, Castor said it was already too late. He even turned down requests from other military units that had wanted to join him in fighting Kazuya, and was only going to fight Kazuya to show off his mettle as the leader of the air force. Thinking back, Castor recalled that the Forbidden Army had been headed toward the Carmen Duchy and couldn't help but wonder why Kazuya was ignoring him, since with only 100 men at his disposal, it would have made sense for Kazuya to take him out first. But before he could make sense of the situation, Carla entered and reported that Kazuya's force had been spotted, and it was just a single battleship. Castor was shocked when he looked outside and saw Kazuya's battleship, and grew angry when Kazuya ordered an assault on his castle. During a brief virtual meeting, Kazuya told Castor to surrender. But because of his pride as a warrior, Castor chose to fight and then sent Carla to take out Kazuya's ship. Once she left, Castor smiled, muttering that if Kazuya truly had what it took to be king, then he'd better prove himself here and now, outside. Carla led the 100-man air force in an attack on the battleship, but the crew barely managed to dodge the relentless assaults pouring from below. At some point, they decided to attack the ship's base to render it immobile, hoping to bring it down for good. But after they were successful, one of Carla's men reported that there was no one on board the ship except for some strange doll. Right then, Carla realized that they were cooked, seeing that the assault had just been a trap to lure them out so Kazuya could deal with her father directly. Around the time Carla left the castle, Castor found himself surrounded by Kazuya's team. As he wondered how they got in, it hit him that Kazuya must have had access to his city's blueprints. Since it was their first time meeting in person, they introduced themselves, but Castor made it clear that Tommen had nothing to do with their fight, and that if he was defeated, Tommen could be trusted to take charge of the Air Force. Seeing how deeply Castor cared for his men, Kazuya asked him to surrender instead, but Castor told him that a warrior couldn't back down once he had made up his mind to do something. Without wasting time, he drew his weapon, and Aisha stepped in to fight on Kazuya's behalf, leaving Castor a bit amused that Kazuya wouldn't fight for himself. Just like that, a brutal battle kicked off, with Castor landing most of the heavy hits. Mid-fight, he acknowledged Aisha's strength and even asked if she considered Kazuya a good master. But instead of answering directly, Aisha said she wished to stay by Kazuya's side forever. Hearing this, Castor smiled and attacked harder, realizing she was just like him. But before he could overpower her, Lisha joined the fight and used ice elemental magic to restrain him, giving Aisha the opening to land a nasty kick that ended the fight. As Castor acknowledged defeat, he asked Lisha what she thought of Kazuya. She said he was wonderful and that she wanted him to stay king, and even added that she would take up a blade against her own father if he tried to take the throne back, leaving Castor completely shocked at how far she was willing to go. When Kazuya heard his battleship explode, he informed Lisha that the Air Force would return, so she placed a slave collar around Castor's neck, designed to explode if he tried to attack Kazuya. When Carla returned, she was shocked to see her father in his condition and drew out her sword to fight. But when she realized that they had already been defeated, she stood down and allowed Aisha to place the collar around her neck. Right then, Kazuya placed Tommen in charge of the Air Force and instructed him to join the Forbidden Army. Curious, Tommen asked what would come of Carla and Castor, and Kazuya said their case would be reviewed when the war was over. The following morning, while Kazuya traveled to join the war, Lisha tried to beg on Carla's behalf since they were friends. But Kazuya told her she had committed a crime of rebellion and that he would lose the trust of his people if he let her off the hook. Even Carla told Lisha not to plead on her behalf and admitted that she was aware when Kazuya requested her father's help. Presently, as Halbert sees the Air Force soldiers flying in, he assumes they're still under Castor's control, but is left completely shocked when they help to fight off the mercenaries. When Kazuya shows up, Halbert is happy to see him, impressed that he could win the heart of the Air Force as they had planned earlier. At the Randall Castle, while the politicians complain that the Air Force has betrayed them, Carmen receives a status report from his right-hand man, Beowulf, and accepts that he has lost the battle. Although shocked, the politicians suggest that they sacrifice the innocents in the city to preserve their lives. But Carmen shuts that down and condemns them to receive a slave collar on their necks. After Beowulf is done with them, Carmen condemns himself and allows Beowulf to cuff him as he intends to turn himself in. A white flag is raised above his castle, signaling to Kazuya that he has surrendered, But to Beowulf's surprise, Kazuya ignores the castle and heads west with the Forbidden Army. When Carmen hears this, he recalls when Kazuya threatened to walk over him once he's won and laughs. Realizing that Kazuya is going after Gaius and his forces. While traveling with Kazuya, Carla demands answers to understand what's going on, and Licia reveals that Carmen arranged everything. According to Kazuya, he never wants to fight against the Dukes, adding that Excel has always been on his side the entire time, thanks to Juana. Then he reveals what Glaive told him about Carmen a few days ago. Back then, Glaive revealed that Carmen wanted to gather all the corrupt politicians into one place and stage a rebellion with them so that Kazuya could defeat them. When Kazuya heard this, he got pissed and demanded to know why Carmen would do such a thing. Then Glaive told him that the assets he had seized from the corrupt politicians were only a fraction of their wealth. He mentioned that the corrupt politicians had hired mercenaries from Zem, and that was how Kazuya realized that Carmen was trying to get the politicians to spend all their hidden funds. But when he questioned what would happen since the money would end up going to Zem, Glaive explained that by capturing the politicians, the mercenaries would be taken prisoner, and the money spent would be recovered as ransom using the mercenaries as leverage. Although the idea was splendid, Kazuya hated it because it would mean that Carmen would throw himself under the bus. But Glaive said Carmen trusted him and was entrusting him with the future. Kazuya explains this to Carla in the present, adding that he kept the news to himself and only told Licia at the last minute so that his plans wouldn't fail. Meanwhile, midday hits, and Gaius runs out of patience, but before he can stage an attack on Altamura, Excel appears on the city's walls, leaving him shocked. He wonders how Excel got to the city since it takes 3 days to reach there from Lagoon City. But when Julius considers that she might have been there the whole time, he tells Gaius that it's a trap and they should retreat. But Gaius refuses. Right then, Excel materializes a crystal cast that allows Kazuya to broadcast a message to everyone in the city, telling them about the results of the civil war. After he announces that he's in control of the military, he sends a message to Gaius, promising that he'll invade Amdonia and take over the capital city of Van. Threatened, Gaius orders an immediate retreat to Van, but at night, his troops are ambushed by Kazuya's forces. By the time they make it past a valley, his soldiers are reduced from 30,000 to 15,000, but somehow, Gaius manages to recover about 10,000 more from nearby villages. The following morning, when Gaius arrives at Van, he is pleased to see that his castle still stands, so he orders his men to prevent Kazuya's forces from taking over. Meanwhile, Kazuya receives intel that Gaius's men are approaching and proceeds to draw out a battle plan. When the time comes, both armies engage in brutal combat, with Ludwig leading Kazuya's troops. At the camp, Carla notices that Kazuya is spaced out, so she asks what's up, only for Kazuya to tell her that he's thinking of surrendering himself to Amdonia to plead for his men's lives if it comes down to it. This surprises Carla as she wonders if Kazuya isn't afraid to die, but Kazuya admits that he's scared, and finds it odd that he sent his men to war when he's not been properly announced as King of Elfrieden yet. Meanwhile, at the battlefield, Gaius calls Julius and tells him to escape with some soldiers since he already knows they've lost. When Julius tries to argue with him, Gaius explains that he was a fool to send exhausted soldiers to war and offers to buy Julius some time to escape. However, Julius tells Gaius to escape instead, but when Gaius mentions that Kazuya is after his head and that he'll be chased if he flees, Julius is forced to retreat. Once he leaves, Gaius stages a full charge on Kazuya's forces, but intel quickly reaches Kazuya's side that Gaius is approaching their camp to wipe them out. Right then, Kazuya places Carla under Licia, prepared to yield the throne to the princess if anything happens to him, but Carla shuts that down. She offers to fight instead, and when Kazuya sees that she can be useful, he approves her request. On the other hand, Ludwig spots a unit of the Amdonian soldiers and attacks their leader, thinking it's Gaius, only to be shocked when he sees that it's a body double. As for the real Gaius, he takes out some of Kazuya's men and faces Carla in a brutal fight, almost overpowering her with brute force. But before things can get worse, Dylan joins the fight and repels Gaius while Kazuya shows up with reinforcements. When Gaius sees Kazuya and tries to attack him, Dylan grabs onto him, and following Kazuya's orders, Carla sets Dylan on fire, and he explodes. As the smoke clears, both Kazuya and Carla are shocked to see that Gaius is still alive, and he remains standing even after Kazuya's men shoot dozens of arrows at him. With his last strength, Gaius aims his sword at Kazuya but misses his target and smiles as he falls to the ground, allowing Kazuya to finally claim the win. That night, news of Gaius's demise quickly reaches Roro, so she tells Colbert and her butler, Sebastian, to give her some space to grieve. The following day, while Kazuya sits on Gaius's throne, Licia can't help but wonder if he'd been planning to take Van all along. Kazuya confirms this, but before he can explain why he didn't share his plans, she cuts him off, saying she's impressed that his men suffered so few casualties during the war, despite only a handful of people knowing the strategy. Kazuya then explains that he had Hakuya ensure the villagers near the border were evacuated in advance. A few days earlier, Yuno's adventuring party had been on a mission near the border, where Yuno herself came across some Amdonian soldiers. But before they could spot her, Dylan appeared out of nowhere, hit her, and told her not to scream. Then, the soldiers saw flaming monsters and fled in fear, not realizing it was all part of Kazuya's plan to drive them away so they wouldn't notice when he began evacuating the nearby village. In the present, Kazuya learns that Julius has escaped the battlefield and fled west, while Roroa has left town with Colbert and other key officials. Since Van is now short on leadership, Kazuya asks Hakuya to send in key bureaucrats from Elfrieden. After that, he orders Poncho to sell the excess weapons from Van's treasury to raise funds to tackle the food crisis in the city, and he offers to ship in food from his kingdom if there's a shortage. As for Glaive, he reports that the army is in good spirits and ready to take over the rest of Amdonia, but Kazuya shuts that down and says he's only interested in Van. When Licia argues against this, Kazuya reminds her that any territory they take will be null and void once the Empire shows up because of the signed treaty. He's worried that sanctions from the Empire will be the least of their problems, even though Amdonia attacked first. Regardless, his priority is to return the city to normal before the Empire arrives, so he summons Shunan to help with the next phase of his plan. Later, Kazuya sets Aisha up in a revealing outfit to host a musical show for the citizens of Van. Aisha feels shy since her plots are on display, but after much persuasion from Kazuya, she musters the courage to appear on the broadcast with him. While Juuna performs live on the broadcast, Kazuya pulls Aisha aside and tells her to keep a close eye on him when the next singer takes the stage. Without asking why, Aisha slams her fist to her chest, promising to protect him no matter what. The people of Van are pleased with Juuna's performance, but next up is General Wonder, the second in command of the Amdonian army. She's tasked with singing the Amdonian national anthem, but when she's done, she asks Kazuya to take her head since it's illegal to sing another country's anthem. Kazuya, however, refuses and tells her it's not illegal and that she's free to sing whatever song she wants. The following day, at the Grand Chaos Empire, a knight named Maria Euphoria appears before her sister, Jean, who is the leader of the Empire, and reports that she's leaving for Van. She reveals that she wants to see Kazuya and negotiate for the peaceful return of Van back to Amdonia. Although Jean knows that Amdonia is in the wrong for attacking Elfrieden at first, she can't ignore Kazuya's control of Van because of the signed treaty. Seeing that she's heard good things about Kazuya, she believes that if Maria talks to him, then maybe they can get to a desired conclusion. However, Maria shuts that down, telling her that she and Kazuya are opposite sides of the same coin since Jean is an idealist and Kazuya's a realist. The following day, Kazuya and Licia are buried in a pile of paperwork, all because Kazuya took over Van. Now that the citizens of Van are in high spirits, life in the city feels like it's finally back to normal. When Roro visits, she sees for herself how everyone's going about their day with smiles on their faces, shops open, and the streets lively. The people are happy, grateful for the freedom they've gained and the lighter taxes Kazuya introduced. Seeing all this, Roro tells Colbert that it's going to be hard for anyone to turn these people against Kazuya now, especially since they've grown used to the comfortable life he's given them. And if anyone tries to stir trouble, the people will likely revolt to protect it. However, deep down, Roroa still holds a grudge against Kazuya and would want to get back at him for unaliving her father. Not long after, Kazuya gets word that an army of 50,000 is already on its way from the Empire. According to Hakuya, it'll take a while for the main force to arrive, but the advance team, led by Jean, is expected to reach Van soon. On hearing this, Kazuya orders Hakuya to keep him updated on the Empire's movements so they won't be caught off guard. Later on, Poncho shows Kazuya a flower called the Beguiling Lily and explains that its pollen can cause powerful hallucinations if inhaled, turning people into sleepwalkers. That alone makes Kazuya nervous, but Poncho quickly reassures him that the pollen's already been removed. What Poncho really wants to show Kazuya is the lily's bulb, which is the part used to make a delicious dish. The moment Kazuya sees it, he gets interested because the plant's root is a high-value product, and according to Poncho, it has no hallucinatory effects. Kazuya starts thinking that the plant can be mixed with other ingredients to help with the food shortage in Van, but he worries it might not work since it's hard to harvest the bulb. Then Poncho explains that with trained orangutans, harvesting the bulbs will be easy, coupled with the fact that there's already a supply of orangutans in Amdonia that can handle it. With that, Kazuya gives the green light and tells Poncho to ramp up production right away. Later on, Kazuya takes Aisha and Tommoay to a store to buy them presents, but to avoid drawing attention, the three of them wear disguises so no one figures out who they are. While chatting with the store owner, Sebastian, Kazuya learns that someone as sharp as him had visited the shop just a few days ago, and although he doesn't know who the person is, it's Princess Roroa. After picking out gifts for all his friends, Kazuya leaves the store with Tommoay and Juna and takes a break under a tree to relax. That's when Jean suddenly shows up. Having managed to slip into the city without anyone noticing, Jean admits she came to size Kazuya and his friends up so she'd know who she's dealing with. She acknowledges Kazuya as a master tactician and says she respects the way he handles things, and even admits that her sister would have loved to meet someone like him. Kazuya returns the compliment and apologizes for not signing the treaty even though he understands the Empire's goal of keeping the continent safe. But when it comes down to it, he makes it clear that he's not ready to give up Van. Jean realizes that Kazuya isn't the type that's going to back down easily, so she says it'll all come down to negotiations in the end. As she leaves, Kazuya reminds himself that he has to be fully prepared because those talks might not go smoothly. When Kazuya gets home, he hands out the gifts he bought, and when Aisha gets hers, she promises to act more feminine around Kazuya so she can be by his side. Licia is visibly jealous when she sees this, but she lightens up the moment she sees the beautiful necklace Kazuya gives her. As she tries it on, Kazuya quietly makes up his mind that he'll do whatever it takes to protect the people he loves and keep moving the kingdom forward. That brings us to the end of today's video. If you watched up to this point, let's confuse the fake anime watchers by commenting on who is more giggity between Aisha and Juana. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And check out this next video, it might just be your favorite anime recapped.